When you spend a decade inside an institution, you gain a particular kind of perspective, not just of the deals that were done, but of the discipline, culture, judgment, and perhaps most importantly, the people that made those deals possible. From 1998 to 2008, while working at the RBTT Merchant Bank, I had the unique privilege of experiencing that very process from the inside out. What follows is not a personal story, but a story of an institution that quietly punched far above its weight and helped reshape capital markets across the Caribbean and Central America. Investment banks, often referred to as merchant banks in the Caribbean, play a very critical role in the economic development of countries. They do so in at least three distinct ways. First, they mobilize large pools of capital in ways that traditional financial organizations, including commercial banks, are often unable to. And in so doing, they enable the financing of major construction, infrastructure, and capital-intensive projects. Second, they are frequently the principal and sometimes the only source of financing for governments, particularly in the structuring and underwriting of large bond issues. The third and final key role investment and merchant banks play is in the transformative role in converting small, privately held, family-run businesses into publicly listed companies through the IPO process. Yet, despite the importance of these institutions, when most people hear the term investment bank or merchant bank, their minds immediately jump to Wall Street, to billion-dollar deals, and to the global capital markets. The Caribbean and smaller regional capital markets, more broadly, rarely ever feature in these conversations. The irony here, however, is impossible to ignore. The reality is that in small, developing, open economies, such as those of the Caribbean, which are typically starved of international capital, regional investment and merchant banks assume an outsized role in infrastructure development, project finance, and bond issuance for both governments and corporates. Put simply, in developing countries, the role of investment and merchant banks are magnified and not diminished. In today's episode, I pay tribute to the RBTT Merchant Bank and a group of pioneering bankers that played a transformational role in reshaping the financial landscape of the Caribbean and Central America. RBTT Merchant Bank, for all intents and purposes, was established in 1991 as a subsidiary of a larger financial group, the RBTT Financial Holdings Group. At inception, its mandate was quite modest: to develop financing opportunities, primarily in the area of government financing, which was, at that time, an underserved financing niche. As the first institution of its kind in Trinidad and Tobago to engage in investment banking, what began as something of an experiment with very limited objectives evolved into one of the most strategic, successful, and profitable investments ever made by a financial group. In 1991, the merchant bank's pre-tax earnings stood at a mere 5.4 million TT dollars. At that time, little more than a rounding error relative to the larger group's overall profitability. However, by 2005, RBTT Merchant Bank was generating in excess of $300 million in annual profits, accounting for approximately 30% of the group's overall earnings, while employing less than 5% of its total staff. From its tentative steps in 1991 and its initial modest mandate, By 2008, the bank had become the dominant player in the regional capital markets across the Caribbean and Central America, and was earning a reputation for innovation and execution. From a purely Trinidad-focused operation in 1991, RBTT Merchant Bank was, by 2008, executing financing mandates from Jamaica in the Northern Caribbean to Guatemala in the heart of Central America. While its early years were centered on underwriting government and government-guaranteed securities, the bank later led complex, non-recourse project financing in the energy and infrastructure sectors. At its peak, RBTT Merchant Bank competed head-to-head with global investment banks such as Bear Stearns, Credit Suisse, Morgan Stanley, and Dresdner Bank of Germany. In 2007, in recognition of its pioneering work in the area of renewable energy and project finance, the bank was awarded the prestigious title of Latin America Deal of the Year by Euromoney Project Finance magazine for its role in underwriting and financing the US $226 million 94 megawatt Zacbal hydroelectric project in Guatemala. That accolade followed closely on the heels of being named Best Power Deal by Latin Finance magazine in that same year. So what were the factors which transformed a small indigenous Trinidadian merchant bank into a significant regional player in the investment banking arena? What were the hallmarks of some of the landmark transactions consummated during this period? Who were some of the key players involved at the bank during this spectacular transformation? Where are they today? Today, wherever you live or work in the Caribbean or Central America, whether or not you have ever heard the name RBTT Merchant Bank or not, your life has likely been touched or affected by the work of this institution. Why do I say this? Let us consider a few examples. In Jamaica today, Highway 2000, Jamaica's largest toll road infrastructure, was financed by an international bond from the Royal Merchant Bank. If you live in St. Kitts, Port Zante, a cruise terminal and marina located in Basseterre, was also completed with financing from RBTT Merchant Bank. Ditto, the following major and regional infrastructure projects as well. The Princess Juliana International Airport and Seaport Cargo Terminal in St. Martin, where the bank raised over $200 million for these projects. The Sandals Resort at Pigeon Point in St. Lucia, as well as the Coast Guard headquarters in Barbados, was also financed by the RBTT Merchant Bank. Likewise, the St. George's Medical School in Grenada and the Mazaroni Granite Quarry in Guyana, they too came to life as a consequence of the work of the RBTT Merchant Bank. In Martinique, in the French Caribbean, the RBTT Merchant Bank underwrote a Euro 51 million financing facility to facilitate the development of the waterfront in Fort-de-France with commercial and residential real estate. Further afield and with specific reference to the energy sector, the bank led the US 104 million financing for the E.G. Heine power plant in the Dominican Republic, and it also underwrote and financed a total of US $250 million for the award-winning Rio General and Zacbal hydroelectric power projects in Costa Rica and Guatemala, respectively. These examples, of course, only scratch the surface and exclude the substantial volume of sovereign and corporate financings executed across the region during the period. So what transformed a small Trinidad-based merchant bank into a regional investment banking powerhouse? I ask again. At its core, a successful investment bank is built on strategy, people, risk discipline, and trust. And while the RBTT Merchant Bank possesses all of these attributes, including deep long-term relationships with corporates and regional governments, a reputation for discretion and execution, and an ability to originate proprietary deals, arguably, its most important quality and attribute, by a long shot, was the bank's ability to attract and to retain a solid cadre of high-caliber bankers with strong technical skills and commercial judgment, and a deeply collaborative and meritocratic culture. So who were the key players involved in transforming this erstwhile TT-centric bank into a regional investment banking powerhouse? Who were the players? The two individuals most responsible for the bank's meteoric rise were undoubtedly Rodney Prasad and Keith King. While Rodney provided general oversight and strategic direction, Keith was the driving force behind talent recruitment, compensation design, and relationship building across governments and corporates. Today, Keith is the executive chairman of First Line Securities, a successful boutique investment firm which he founded, offering corporate and capital market solutions across the Caribbean. Needless to say, Rodney and Keith did not act alone. They were supported by a remarkable team and an able and competent cast of characters. There was Mark Singh, who headed up the origination desk, and later took on the role of managing director. There were also Filippo Alario and Daryl White, who led the group's syndication and distribution efforts. They too also held the position of managing director in later years. Today, Filippo is the executive chairman of the Belize Bank, based in Belize, and Daryl holds the position of managing director for the Caribbean region for IDB Invest. There was also Mohan Mahis and Christopher Mack. Always a brilliant financial engineer, Mohan is currently a regional financial consultant, advising corporates on complex financing deals. Chris, on the other hand, is currently the executive chairman of JT Allen, a family-owned property development and food retailer conglomerate. Then there was Vashti Jatan Singh, the Merchant Bank's legal counsel, and Heidi Achong. Today, Vashti is the General Counsel for Global Wealth Solutions at Raymond James, an international investment bank, and Heidi, who is based in Costa Rica, heads up Norfund, a Norwegian investment fund for developing countries. And then, of course, there were the Young Turks, Mark Jardine, Angus Young, and Richard Sammy. Today, Mark is the Managing Director and Vice President for Commercial Banking at RBC Royal Bank, based in Trinidad and Tobago. Angus, on the other hand, is the Chief Executive Officer and Vice President for Corporate and Investment Banking for NCB Capital Markets, based in Jamaica. And Richard is currently the CEO designate for Republic Financial Holdings, the largest financial group in the English-speaking Caribbean. So what does all of this tell us? What can we take away from this remarkable journey? Perhaps the true legacy of the RBTT Merchant Bank is not merely the billions of dollars raised, nor the airports, highways, power plants, and ports that it helped bring into existence, but rather the human capital it cultivated, the confidence which it instilled, and the proof which it offered that world-class investment banking could be built from the Caribbean and for the Caribbean. In an era when we are often encouraged to think small, RBTT Merchant Bank thought big and executed even bigger. Its story reminds us that institutions matter, leadership matter, and that with the right mix of vision, discipline, and people, regional capital can shape regional destiny. And that, perhaps, is the most consequential legacy of the RBTT Merchant Bank. Something to think about. A word to the wise.